Wade in the water, wade in the water, children, wade in the water. God's a gonna trouble the water.
What's good, everyone? I'm Tyrell Wide, and I'm bringing you an all-new podcast titled To America. This podcast is based on Black history that's been lost in the shuffle. Black slavery is an eggshell topic. Slavery was a horror movie that some people never want to face or watch. I want to bring awareness to issues Black communities face that's also ignored. In my opinion, slavery was purposeful, not accidental. The first installment of this series starts in 3, 2, 1. Heinous, torture, resilience, and unforgettable pain are some words that come to my mind when I think of slavery. Even though tribes in Africa fought with one another and the alpha tribes would enslave the weaker tribes, none of the tribes could imagine the destruction that was before them. Once European merchants discovered African civilizations, they thought it was okay to invade, enslave, and capture Africans for profit. This is a true story of how African nations were seized from their homeland. From about 1525 on, Africans were enslaved human cargo aboard human feces-ridden ships, transported, packed like sardines, sold and traded for any and everything you could imagine. After the evil journey, many enslaved Africans arrived to many parts of this land. In 1670, this time was considered the Age of Discovery. On the west bank of the Ashley, the settlement originally named Charlestown for Charles II was founded by English colonists, thus beginning the colonization of South Carolina. In 1680, it was moved to its new site and became the commercial center of trade in rice and indigo. It was incorporated briefly in 1722 as Charles City and Port, and it was reincorporated as Charleston in 1783. From around the 1690s, Africans were recruited in large numbers, and by 1715, the Black population made up about 60% of the total population of the colony. This was a distinctive characteristic of South Carolina, since it was the only colony in North America where this proportion existed. African slaves came to be the universal solution to labor problems in plantation colonies when other options, including white indentured servitude and bound Native American labor, proved insufficient. As in Virginia, several slaves came from the West Indies in the 17th century to South Carolina. Most of the enslaved Africans brought to South Carolina were from Barbados. The Middle Passage was known as the middle leg of the triangular route of trading and selling across the Atlantic Ocean. This was an awful experience for the African men, women, and children coming to the New World. Because slaves could be sold for more in America than they could be sold for in Africa, they would pack as many Africans as possible on these ships to get them to America. Not only were the slaves chained to the decks by their necks and legs, but they were so tightly packed in that they couldn't move, chained or not. Furthermore, sick slaves were thrown overboard to prevent the spread of disease. This document is a slave code of South Carolina, made in May 1740, which is called the Negro Act. This law made it illegal for enslaved Africans to move abroad, assemble in groups, earn money, and to educate themselves. This also allowed owners to kill slaves who were rebellious if necessary. This law ended in 1865. Rice and Slaves, written by Daniel Littlefield, highlights how South Carolina exemplified the effort of African and Europeans in molding American civilization. During the colonial era, the grad at grad was rarely shown. The Europeans definitely did not show this attribute, as they were very cruel. Only regarding themselves, they were loving and open to growth. However, the slaves showed more characteristics. They were mostly religious, open to growth, and loving of each other, despite being rebellious at times because of the way they were being treated. Africans had certain benefits, unlike Europeans. They were familiar with tropical herbs, their ability to use canoes or perigoos to travel along inland waterways, and their ability to fish allowed them to live off the land far more easily than their masters could. Their contact with native peoples was encouraged by shared attitudes towards land and nature, and comparable aspects of material culture. Both had basket weaving traditions, and on inland rivers, both were skilled in the use of small watercraft. Africans were among the first native languages to be recognized and were also used as translators. The experience of their African bondsmen helped the English colonists, many of whom came from rice-growing regions in Africa and knew more about the cultivation of the crop than did the Englishmen. South Carolinian slaves grew rice on dry upland land in the early years, but planters soon moved to inland swamps. Rice cultivation was adjusted to the tidal flow at the end of the 18th century, and rice fields were built from low-lying regions facing rivers. This meant the workload was increased for slaves. These fields required large dikes, levees, and canals to be built by hand with picks and shovels, working with snakes, alligators, and other vermin in the mud. In 1720, 12,000 of the 17,000 people in South Carolina were black. Just 15,000 of the 45,000 people in South Carolina were white by 1740. In 1765, blacks outnumber whites, 90,000 to 40,000, by more than 2 to 1, and Charleston transported more slaves than any other port in North America. The colony in 1740 passed its most detailed slave law in reaction to the Stonewall Uprising, which made it unlawful for more than 7 adult male slaves to move together except in the company of a white person. Slaves may have had a simpler time in Carolina than those in, say, Virginia, because there were many religious groups. Slaves in South Carolina provided each other with spiritual, moral, and cultural support. Music played a huge part in the slaves' lives. The songs were called Old Negro spirituals. The songs they rehearsed would keep them closer to God. In the decades between 1710 and 1730, natural growth began, although it was disrupted by growing imports into the small country after 1720. In their spare time, slaves sold or exchanged goods they acquired or produced with other slaves and with whites. From oysters to peaches, from cake to cloth, they sold everything and were not above organizing to regulate costs. You know, while doing research on this difficult topic, it makes me aware of the real hardships my ancestors endured. I feel any person that can enslave, torture, and dehumanize another human being is flat out evil. The fact that white extremists somehow suppress their conscience to have enough boldness to own another human is unimaginable to me. Black history, which is American history, is filled with heinous violence, kidnapping, bigotry, hate, and prejudice. I wonder, what caused all this hate towards one group of people? I think blacks enduring wicked slavery mixed with racism back then was devastating. And today, to see all the racism and indifference makes no sense and is plain out infuriating at this point. Why did slavery become so popular in the first place? Are Africans really the root cause of slavery? It's tough to think that Africans owned Africans, then sold them to Europeans. If you think about it, this was the biggest human trafficking event in history. Europeans broke up tribes in Africa, which led to the termination of kinship. Family structures were pretty much ruined for Africans from the beginning. Makes me ask the question, could this be the reason why some African American families are divided today? Seems like the black family was devoured from the beginning, and it hurts. I'll be tackling all of these unanswered questions soon. You definitely don't want to miss Drag to America. Always know I'll be tackling black issues today, not just in February. In the meantime, stay tuned. All my listeners, please wash your hands a million times. Find Lysol and spray it. I'm Ty Worldwide. Take care. God bless.
Ooh, oh, oh. Ooh, oh. God is gonna trouble. God's gonna trouble the water. There's healing in the water. Yeah. The water. Deliverance in the water. God's gonna trouble the water. My God is gonna trouble the water.